Hello, and welcome to the latest installment in our UXDX online series. I hope you're as excited as I am for our talks today. But before we jump into those, I want to give a really quick introduction to UXDX and why we host these sessions. So at UXDX, our motto is really that the world is full of bad software. And I don't mean that by software that has bugs in it or doesn't work. I mean the kind of software, and I always use a banking example, where you've got like a traditional bank and it's just so clunky and difficult to use versus one of the modern digital first banks. Now, technically, the apps do the exact same thing, but I know which one I always go for, and therefore which company is starting to dominate in the marketplace. Now, our mission is to help companies build an environment that can't build bad software, because I don't think it's down to the skills or the motivation or anything of the people in those companies. It's down to the processes that they're being forced to follow. So our goal at UXDX is to help companies shift away from waterfall or water scrum fall approaches to truly empowered product teams. Now that's really easy to say. It took me a sentence really quick, really difficult to do in practice. And that's where all of these talks come in, because nobody's going to cover the entire flow of what needs to change to enable this. But we ask people to come and share parts of how they're improving their ways of working so that you can hopefully learn something that you can apply in your situation. And that's where the questions come in. So if you're listening to something, you're thinking, how can I apply that? Post the question. The speakers have some time at the end of their talks, and they'd love to hear your questions. But that's enough about me. You're not here to listen to me. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker for this evening. Kevin McDonagh is the Director of Product Management. He's going to be talking about cringe-driven development, a template for unavoidable, valuable progress. So I would like to welcome Kevin to the stage. Over to you, Kevin.
Hello. Hello. Thank you. Okay. Hi, I'm Kevin McDonagh. I lead product at AppVelocity, and I am going to speak to you today about harnessing the power of cringe in your product with cross-functional interviewing. And I'm going to start with a story about a submarine in 1945, the U-1206. And these submarines, at the end of around 1945, they cost around $50 to $100 million. And they took only 8 months to get to production. They were really churning these out. And there aren't many creature comforts on a submarine, especially then. And the most requested upgrade during this time was for the waste facilities. And so there was a model that they wanted to put out that they believed that could be submerged like longer by having the ability to stay submerged, and because you had to come up to release the waste. But it was quite complicated. They came up with a really complicated method where you could have vacuum chambers that would release the waste into different areas and then out actually while you were submerged. And it was so complicated, you needed a dedicated engineer to man the bathrooms. And the story is that on the maiden voyage of the U-1206, Carl Schlitt, the commanding officer, the captain of the submarine, in its first few days at sea, he had used it once before, and he felt maybe a little bit overconfident. He felt like he got the gist, and there's different stories as to what happened next. But you can now visit the U-1206 off of Cruden Bay in Scotland with a scuba outfit, and you can go and you can visit the remains of it. What happened was that he got himself into a bit of a pickle, and then he called the engineer, and then he left. And the engineer was like, ah! And the water all came out, and it cascaded onto the batteries, which were below the bathroom. And then methane gas was released, and they had to quickly raise up the submarine to the surface, and the Royal Air Force were just at that moment going above, and they bombed it, and everyone had to escape it. And this, I believe, illustrates a challenge that all startups have. You got to get your product to market. You got to do it. You got to get out there fast. And there are compromises you're going to have to make. But those compromises, they have to be made in a fashion which there's joint up thinking, and the cascading failures that can happen when there's not the joined up thinking of working together as a team. You can think some things are really trivial, but they're not trivial, and it can work in a laboratory, but it needs to be truly modular in the context. So if you take one thing away from this talk today, just this one thing, the one thing is that for startups in particular, cross-functional interviewing is mandatory. Like, it's not a negotiable. You need to have all of the different disciplines involved in your interviewing to get that buy-in, to get that to overcome all of the unknown unknowns together and make it a conversation. And it's only that way that you're going to be able to surface the technicalities that you don't know before they happen. Those cascading failures. Maybe the batteries shouldn't be underneath the bathroom when it leaks. Like, maybe that shouldn't happen. And you need to completely challenge that all the time. And I'm going to give you a recipe, which is a very simple recipe for growth and for success. I believe it entirely, and it's simply just like rubbing your nose in it all the time. And I can't guarantee like the amount of growth, but I can guarantee that you are going to see people try and react to those challenging problems all the time. My background is that I have ran a large digital product agency. I have worked in large companies helping their digital products achieve like significant millions of users growth. And I have had my own startups where I've been working in cutting edge technologies, trying to get people to use augmented reality, TikTok and augmented reality, and kind of and in some really challenging circumstances for like old world industries of fresh produce. But now I am working in the now, where you should be using AI user testing in your products before speaking with your customers to make sure that you're raising the floor and helping that out. But today I'm going to be talking about Cringe. So, Cringe, what is Cringe? And then I'm going to tell you about how I've embraced with Cringe and how I've used that power of Cringe in my organization. And I hope you can too. Cringe is like a secondhand embarrassment. It's like you're laughing at, not laughing with. And some figures in British culture that best reflect those feelings are like pioneering comedians like Steve Coogan, who has ran with Alan Partridge, who he's metamorphosized into over the years, and Richard Medley, who has not broken character for 30 years. Very funny man. So these, in the context of interviewing, depending on if you are an observer or an interviewer, cringe is really largely shame. And shame is the result of internalizing a social contempt. It's a feeling of falling below the the judgment, the bar of opinion. And the shame that counts most is in front of those you respect and admire, your peers. And enduring the experiences of shame is traumatic. It leaves like a long memory, a long held memory. And the shame of the world has a precise function. It serves to immunize us. It can potentially prevent a repetition of like horror and hatred. And that's a quote from Primo Levi. But the antibodies that you get when you're feeling this shame, you can't get them secondhand. Like, you need to feel the shame firsthand. But when you realize this construct of shame, it can kind of be deflected. You can turn it back on itself. And the way that I think of shame is like a box. It's a box of like other people's opinions, like it's the social opinions, and we have to kind of go over those opinions. We have to imagine past those opinions. I believe shame ought to be the price that we pay in interviewing, and everyone involved in it. That's what it is. You have to seek it out and take part in it. During his lifetime, Jean Genet was a scoundrel. He lived around 1910 in France, and he was a thief and a homosexual, which was not encouraged then. And he wrote a book about his experiences in the Maitreyi penal colony, where young delinquents were sent to be rehabilitated and disciplined. And throughout all of this discipline, he came up with this kind of spiritual exercise in himself, where he thought to himself, for every charge brought against me, and just as it may be, from the bottom of my heart, I shall answer yes. He started to say, like, yes, I'm taking it. That's how you perceive me, and I am going to work beyond those foundations. So he built this system where he was strong in this system. Something he could control in this system, because the desperation not to die confiscates everything, including inducing a lack of shame. It induces a lack of shame, and this I believe is very pertinent to startups. Like, you don't get to be ashamed. You don't get to worry about that. You have to engage with the shame where it is happening. You need to do it, and you have to imagine past that shame, because we need imagination to conceptualize what this shame is. But you have to imagine past that and not live in the eyes of others. You need to think yourself greater than that. So moving on to the workflow, how can we engage in a normal workflow, like this conversation of shame? Well, I live by the Lean Startup. If there's only one book that you ever read, it's basically the same book that's been the whole cause of Lean penetrating into the minds of product, and it's the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. But also, I love Lean Customer Development by Cindy Alvarez, and this gives you a structure for doing it. Continuous build habits, where you have got the opportunity solution tree, and escaping the build trap, where we're talking about working to outcomes rather than outputs. And I'm going to mention these as we go along. But the real work of user centricity, I want to be super, super duper clear. It's prioritization, and it's assuming the shame of where you are right now. Because if you are not embarrassed about where you ship, where you start from, then you haven't done it soon enough. You need to be embarrassed, and you need to be there and engaging with the shame all the time. And it's not about tickets, it's not about writing things, it's not about anything else apart from speaking with customers. And you need to be doing that all the time. There's a great story about Jeff Bezos. Sorry to it's a bit trite to pull out these people you've heard of a million times. But Jeff Bezos is in a meeting. He's in his his executive staff meeting with everyone, and someone's got a stat on the board, and it says that average phone wait time is 59 seconds. And he was like, really? And it was 59 seconds is average. That's great. But he had this email account where he was seeing all these people complaining about the wait time all the time. And so in front of all of his executive staff, he phoned the customer support line, of course. And 60 seconds passed, and then 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and there was no answer. Then after 10 minutes, where they were on the hold music, there was still nothing. It was a really long time. And they had to wait a really long time, and nothing was happening. And it turned out that the metric for the average wait time for answer calls ignored the time until it got picked up. And so I think that represents the quote that he said, where he was like, when the data and the anecdotes disagree, the anecdotes are usually right. And seeing that firsthand, there is nothing like seeing that firsthand. There is nothing like internalizing that firsthand and taking that and owning that deep cut. And with my team, where they started from was that they couldn't really see the point, to be honest. But when they felt the pain, they were like, "Oh, I really don't want this anymore." But they kept doing it. More power to them. And whole team interviewing enhances that empathy. It's not just a hypothetical exercise anymore. It's not it's not a thought experiment. You're there and you're speaking to real users using your product, the thing that you're using. And it doesn't matter if they're in the customer success, marketing, the it doesn't matter if they're in HR. They should all be given the opportunity to really be in front of the people using the product that they're talking about all the time. And that is so powerful. It's such a powerful thing. I believe that as our discipline of product management moves more and more and more to being automated in all these other ways, that can never be automated, like that exploration. So it really bridges so many gaps in between that we don't know what we don't know. So we're trying to seek out these user confusions, like the pain points, right? You're gonna see those high bounce rates, and you're gonna see those low feature adoptions, and things that just don't make any sense. That's your opportunity to be interviewing, and you want to take as many people into there as possible for the interview. So I'm going to tell you about when I joined this company I'm with, Velocity, and when I joined what was called AppVelocity, and they were a completely different product, and they didn't have any users. They'd been in development for nearly a year and a half, and they believed that they really knew their audience and knew their product. And I was like, but who are the customers, and like, where are they? And they're like, no, you don't understand. Like, we have so much experience. And I was like, okay. So like what we did was we got together all together, and I opened up my LinkedIn and I said, right, guys, you know the target audience, and we made this target audience together, and we're going to pinpoint people in my LinkedIn network, and we're going to talk to them over the phone, and you're going to sell it to them, because they'll understand, right? And in that first week, we did 8 interviews, I think, over 3 days, 4 days, something like that. And yeah, it didn't go well. It didn't go well at all. And people were confused. The value proposition wasn't clear. And obviously, it had to be worked on. And altogether, there was a kind of a slight despondency and a stepping back. But in that gap, that chasm, there was an opportunity for change away from the tightly held beliefs that previously they knew that they were onto something. When they had to be in that driving seat, when they had to kind of engage with those target users, target customers, which ones, I don't know. They had to really kind of reconcile those differences. So what we did was quickly we found our initial first target customer, and we used a technique called min specs, which is part of the liberating structures, which I thoroughly advise everyone to use. And we iterated through the room to get to a point where, together with our customer, where we found the things that it must do, that must not do, and we iterated to get to a minimum specification. And then from there, we used Rice to prioritize what we're going to deliver from that work. And we came up with this proposition. Okay, get it to market. We've got something that we need to put out there. We had to work to get it to anything that could be used as soon as possible. I put interviews every single week. From now on, we are interviewing every single week, multiple times a week. So I would put some on the Tuesday, some on the Wednesday, and some on the Friday. That sounds excessive, right? Like that sounds hard. But if you want to create urgency, go. Like, these engineers knew that they didn't want to be in those meetings. Like, we had to really kind of get to something fast. So the problem was we had this huge journey where you had to get all the way through this process to make it sync. So the product was completely different then. It was synchronizing variables from design into the code base, and the actual work required internally was too much. It was boring. And you needed to use the terminal. Like I was using the terminal, and me, an experienced user, got it down to like 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes to actually get there. But what I did was I made a scoreboard. I made a scoreboard for time to first publication, which was our North Star. I was like, okay, guys, we're going to get this down. And until we get it down, we're going to be on interviews watching other people do it. And if you want to see cringe, you want to sit for 49 minutes on an interview while you watch people use your product. And you like look at the difference between the guy that it was 49 minutes and they sat through that. Like it wasn't even a week later and it was 18 minutes. That's the power of cringe. If you get the engineers into a room and they're all like, oh my god, I really don't want to sit for 49 minutes watching someone else do it. 18 minutes. That there is absolutely the power. But while we were doing this, the world moved on. The world had already moved on from the proposition as it originally had been set, and Lovable and Bolt and all of these products came out, and they were great, and it just didn't make sense, the value proposition which we were originally on. But it's okay because we've interviewed loads of people, and all of the engineers and the designers all felt the same way. They were like, yeah, like now that we've spoken to all of these designers, we can really quickly pivot. And all of them felt the same way. We all pivoted, very user centric. We've got all of the data needed to really change. In our story maps, we modified them slightly, and from there we were able to kind of find what the opportunities were going to be in this new context, and opportunities that we while we're doing all of our interviews, we always put opportunities right down there, like loads of little bubbles to come back to. And we went back to all of our opportunities and made new opportunity solution trees. That's where we're trying to meet a target. First target's going to be like X amount of users. I think to begin with, it was just having like 10 users. And then from there, what's going to get us that 10 users? Well, we've heard this a whole bunch of times. And then there, we're going to have solutions to get those 10 users. We were very quick to kind of address the high value, lowest satisfaction elements to be able to get out to market where our competitors weren't even looking. And from there, we were able to offer something instant feedback that we believed was going to really see a high uptake. So from when we first released, it was around about here. This is very low activity, but I'm gonna have to fly by because I'm getting on to my time. Quickly, some things that we did that were cringeworthy as well that we had to fight through. That I want to give you the benefit of these cringeworthy moments. We had in Figma, you have the concept of a playground. That's where you can use a plugin very quickly. And we had to fight through this playground. It had loads and loads of steps, and it had loads and loads of text, and we had to tell people how to use it. And we shortened it down, and over 10 interviews, we managed to shorten it down from originally it was like I don't know, 25, 30 steps. We got it down to 3, but still there was loads of text on it, and no one read the text, and everyone was confused. And eventually, over the interviews, we got to basically absolutely none of our interface on, simply a challenge. And this converted way more than anything else. And it's funny how you reduce, and you can say you need to have like the best interface is no interface, but feeling the pain really makes it happen. And we still had all these products, all these challenges with conversion. But all these challenges with conversion, we had like all of these input fields that were required because designers felt like it needed to have these to be a professional design user testing product. Engineers felt like it needed to have this at this period in order to for technical reasons. But after so many input errors, so many lorem ipsum being entered into here, actually witnessing it getting in the way of actually people using it, all at the end of the day, we ended up with one prompt, and it makes the whole team feel the pull towards simplicity all the time. And again, with putting the sample file, putting the demos front and center in front of people, this got it really used. And the worst of all, was the idea of wrapping a section, because in order to make this happen faster, we wanted as small an area as possible to actually consume, because we make a snapshot of it. And we tried everything to get people to understand. We need you to do this. We need you to do this. We even animated it. We told them in every way we could. But all it did was stop people using the product. So eventually we put this little message down here, and it converts better than anything. If you want to make it go faster, do this. If not, more power to you. You can wait. And when people waited, the thing that we did most successfully was simply stick a random link on the interface that people could click out to, and we didn't hear any problems again. And they could just like peruse it. Conversion improved. Hurrah! Great. And that all worked. And you can see here, this is from March, but the user session time just like shot up. So yeah, we're very useful now. It's great. And I want everyone to go and check it out. We're on there anyway. Okay, so basically the benefits and challenges here are, the biggest one I'm gonna say is like analysis paralysis is no more. Don't worry about it. If you pull all those people into the meeting, they are not going to be paralyzed by analysis. Don't worry. They're going to want to tackle it. And it brings the team together in their thinking, and it helps people get creative in the gaps. And you're going to get pushback, and people are going to say things like, "Oh yeah, but like I know what's wrong already." No, you don't know what's wrong. You haven't earned the antibodies. You haven't earned that, and you need to actually experience it first. So I really want everyone to go away from this talk and proudly seek out the cringe. Proudly, as a team, pull people in that might not actually ever want to ever be in an interview, but proudly pull them in to develop those antibodies for your team, for your product, to make it better. And for everyone here today, I want to offer you 50% off our product. This will work for 30 days, or you can search for us on the Figma community. And I thank you very much. Go and embrace your cringe. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kevin. Hope everybody out there is cringing right now. We do have a couple of comments from Joel. He's saying appropriate name, maybe, so you can fill us in, Joel, if you thought it was appropriate. And the other one, Ganesh has asked, can you please relist all 4 book names? So I took down Lean Startup, Continuous Discovery Habits, but you had Lean something else, and
oh yeah, like so the Lean Startup, Continuous Discovery Habits by Teresa Torres, Escaping the Build Trap by Melissa Perry, and Lean Customer Development by Cindy Alvarez. And there's another one as well, Running Lean should be on there. Those are the only books I think anyone needs to build a product nowadays.
Excellent. I'm going to ask you a question about another book that you put up there, and that was around min specs. So you ran over that really quickly.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, so liberating structures. So liberating structures is a canned set of workshop structures to help you through any workshop environment. And if I absolutely advocate everyone to check out Liberating Structures online. It's all free. There's lots of recipes there. And if you're ever going to be in a workshop situation, like as fast as you can get a structure to have a great outcome out of any situation that's been tested like hundreds of thousands of times. And min specs is a great way to get to a minimum specification without even knowing anything about the product.
Great. I'll definitely check that out. Just doing a time check. We got 40 seconds. The only other one I noted was around rice. Is rice not a bit risky because you're baking in assumptions without talking to your customers? Because you said you did your rice prioritization ahead of kind of your tests.
Yeah, I think all of these things are a moving target. They're an ovarian window. There's no like one that like there's like you'll do one thing one time, but it's not the definite time. You have to revisit, revisit, revisit. I'm never scared to do the best with what we have. Like you just kind of got to go with it. And it might be that we had to initially do like estimation before we had enough evidence. But again, analysis paralysis, just move with it and then re-estimate when you know more.
Excellent. And on that, I just want to thank you once again, Kevin. That was a very cringy talk, so thank you for sharing. Okay, moving on to our second talk of this evening, and it is John Freeborn, is Director of Design. He's going to be talking about something different, not about doing the design work, but how not to apply for a design job. So I would like to welcome John to the stage. Over to you, John.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for the intro. My name is John Freeborn. This is How Not to Apply for a Design Job. So why should you listen to me? Let's get into the sort of introduction. I've worked in design for a long time, been a hiring manager, worked at all levels of design. I've had all the titles, worked a lot of places. And, my career path has not been a straight line. It's been pretty messy. I've made every possible mistake that you're going to see in this deck. So, don't, this is not, a shaming, game here. I'm bringing all of my personal experience to the table. I've had a few wins. I've worked at some great places. So hopefully some of this experience can help you all. So let's get into it. So episode 1, the grievous errors. This is like the most obvious of all the mistakes, but shockingly, I see this all the time. You have to include a link to your portfolio. Something. I need something to look at as a design manager. It sounds a little silly to even put this at the beginning, but it happens all too often. Everybody is password protecting their portfolios these days. You have to include a password if you want me to look at your portfolio. Again, it's kind of a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how often this happens. And this really just throws a wrench into the whole process. I have to go and ask if I'm really interested. And the chances of somebody else getting in front of me before you do, because I'm waiting on a password, just lowers your chance of success. This one, and I'm, the disclaimer is here. I've done this more than I care to admit. Applying for a role that you are unqualified for. This really is common, and that sort of leads into this obvious question: how do you know if you are qualified for a role? So the first bullet point probably should be in bold here, but read the job description. You really have to understand what the role is. You have to be honest with yourself, and you have to kind of look and decide, do I have these? Are the bonus things really bonus, or am I looking at the requirements? The job descriptions these days have gotten aspirational. I've seen them. People are asking for 12 years of Figma experience when Figma hasn't existed for that long. They're asking for a video editor who knows Ruby on Rails, who also does light housekeeping. If you see things like that, you should probably just run the other way. But if the job description is well written, really take stock of that job description and ask yourself if you have the majority of those skills. A little data, and I think this is relevant in this world that we live in these days. I've seen this before, and I've seen it in anecdotally in real life. Women tend to apply for roles less often than men, especially if they don't feel like they meet the qualifications. They'll apply for a job if they meet 60% of the qualifications, where men will apply. I'm sorry. Women will apply 60% of the time, where men will apply 100% of the time. It's very odd that they, and I'm probably guilty of this as well, but job descriptions are really a wish list. They're sort of a dream. So do not cut yourself off from an opportunity because you don't meet every bullet point in that job description. You really should take it all into context. But I think it's relevant, and I hate to see people not going for something because of they didn't hit 2 bullet points that maybe weren't that well thought through when that job description was written. This is where it gets a little more interesting. So um, I have had several situations where I had a live job posting and someone reached out to me on LinkedIn and they basically accused me. Hopefully, luckily they did this not publicly, but they were telling me in a LinkedIn message that I didn't review their portfolio, and that that I wasn't being professional. Um, I think it's just an interesting thing to approach someone that way and question their professionalism without any facts. A second situation that happened, also again, thankfully not public, a candidate reached out to me on LinkedIn, accused me of that I didn't know my own job description and that they were totally qualified and that I, made a bad decision. You can feel that way. I've felt that way at times. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't stand up for yourself, but you should take into account what kind of reaction or outcome do you want from an interaction like that. The design world is very small. You never know where you're going to cross paths with someone again, or maybe that hiring manager moves to another company, and the perfect role becomes available in that next opportunity for you. You want to make sure that you're bringing the best possible um, outcome to any situation. And sometimes you just want to be aware of how you're coming across. It's strange that I've seen these more than once. So the second set here, these are things that I would call more annoying than fatal in terms of applying for jobs, but also I've seen it a lot. Again, I've done this multiple times. Applying for multiple roles at once at varying levels. So a bigger company maybe has a senior design role and a mid-level design role and a junior design role. And especially as a younger designer, I probably just applied for all three. It does not really bode well to what how you view yourself as a designer. It gives the company kind of a strange input as far as you don't know where you are in the hierarchy. So yeah, it's just one of those things that I've seen often. No cover letter. And then over the years, I've come to decide I don't need a cover letter. Just show me what you do. Don't tell me. I'm sure different hiring managers have a very different point of view on this, so do not take this as gospel. But the reality is, as a design manager, I have very little time to review your applications. If your portfolio isn't good, the cover letter is not changing my mind. If the portfolio is good, or I have some questions, maybe a cover letter gives me some context, but it's not, really changing my decision. This is something I did for a really long time, showing every single project you've ever done in your portfolio. It's really hard as a design manager, hiring manager, to look at a portfolio with 40 projects. You don't know where to start. My assumption is your best projects are probably at the top, but there's no guarantee of that. I also might just be visually interested in some random thing, and maybe that's not your best work. So you really want to take into account the time that a project or that a design manager has in hiring. And I've heard stories that each application gets 3 minutes. I tried to spend a little more time on my reviews, but it's going to vary wildly. So what I realized is that I really wanted to sort of craft a story with my portfolio. And when I limited my projects to a much smaller group, I just got more interviews. This section is kind of funny, but these are all real things. Immediately trying to connect with someone on LinkedIn after you've applied. I've done this, we've all done this. We're all trying to get an edge, totally understand it. It's not going to lose you a job, I don't think, but I don't know how much it helps. How do you move forward? That's a complicated question, especially in this job market. There's layoffs, bad managers, toxic workplaces. If you've worked in this field long enough, you will experience some of these downsides. I myself have been laid off. I've been forced out, quit jobs when I maybe shouldn't have. I've been part of acquisitions, which sounds cool, but if you're not on the founding team, it really just means you're not going to have a job when they downsize. It's really just take a deep breath, figure out like what your value is, and then, move forward. I know in this current environment, it's really, really tough. So I empathize. The hiring manager is in an interesting spot. And I did a lot of this in a recent job where we would post a role and we would get hundreds of applications within 24 hours. When you are a hiring manager, hiring is a big part of your job, but you still have the actual design work and product reviews and all the other things that you're working on. So it's really like a second job. So you want to, really take into consideration, put yourself in the shoes of that hiring manager. Understand that they're going to have very little time, and you want to be as focused as you can around your application. You want to tell a story and really express your experience. It's really about having a little empathy for the hiring manager, which I know is a little hard to do these days when you just get rejection letters, but it's important. So when I'm hiring, this is my process. I think, given everything I've already told you, this is kind of maybe helpful in terms of like how it goes. So the first thing I look at is a portfolio. I intentionally don't look at a resume. I intentionally don't look at other stuff. I really just want to look at their work. I want to see if it makes sense for the kind of work we're doing. I want to understand kind of like what's important to them as a designer, what their taste level is, what their skills are, even like what projects they choose to put in what order in a portfolio tells me a lot about who that designer is. If that goes well, then I go and look at the resume. I'm looking for confirmation. I'm trying to understand their path as a designer, what they've worked on. And I want to see, kind of how they articulate some of their design experience. It's a data point though. It's not really, I'm not looking for some magic thing in a resume. It's really a continuation of what I saw in the portfolio. The next step is probably one of the most important for me. I call it a screening call. Sometimes I call it, a humanity check. I'm intentionally getting on a phone call, not a video call. I do that to limit bias. And I really just want to have a conversation. I want to talk to the person who's applying. I try really hard to like diffuse the nervousness in these calls. I really just want to have a chat. I'm not asking them to pitch. I want to talk to them. Sometimes these go better than others, but ultimately, my goal is to really just learn a little about who they are as a person. If this call goes well, I move folks forward into a portfolio presentation. And this is their opportunity to get in front of the design team, show a few projects, and really, just demonstrate how they do what they do in that environment. This is not a rehash of their entire portfolio online. I've seen some folks try to take that tact, but it's really a bit of a deep dive into a couple projects. These sessions sometimes go 30 minutes, sometimes they're 45, sometimes an hour, but you really need to be focused in these. And this is, this is kind of showtime. The last stage has different names at different companies. Some companies call it HQ Day, even though everything's done virtually now. Sometimes, there's different titles for it, but it's basically the last stage before a decision is made. Hopefully, you're getting to talk to different people across the organization, not just the design team, but maybe a product manager, maybe other high-level staff at the company. And once you've had the opportunity to talk to all these different people, my process is to really take all of this data from all the different people you talked with and to, put it all into the pot and decide where I'm at. Every company does this really differently. I don't want to get into sort of the nuances of all the differences, but the goal is to really get a viewpoint from various people that I trust on how this candidate would perform in the job. And then, of course, the step that is sort of the most stressful is the final decision. This is the hardest part for a hiring manager, and I understand. I've been on both sides of this. So you should remember that, like, whatever the result of this decision, the design community is small. You never know when you're going to cross paths again. This isn't all about your skills. Obviously, I'm trying to find someone who has skills to fit a job, but it's also about culture. It's also about the personality. It's also about the company, the makeup of the team, projects that are coming in the future, the maturity of the design culture of the company, and a half a dozen other things that you don't care about, but I have to take into account with filling a role. So you should not take this as your self-worth. It's way more complicated than that, and oftentimes out of your control. So it's hard. So what have we learned here? Please include a portfolio and a password. If I don't have that, you're not moving forward in the process. Apply for roles that match your experience. Be realistic, and apply for things that are a good match. Don't attack the gatekeeper. Please don't do things like I described. I know we're all just trying to find a good job, hire good designers, take care of people. So it doesn't help. Tell me a story. As a hiring manager, I am a human being. Human beings are wired for stories. So, help me remember you. Tell me something. Don't show me a barrage of things that I will forget. And the last piece, and this comes back to my comment about empathy before, but the hiring manager experience is really important. And if you are a designer of any stripe, or especially a designer in the UX field, you understand user flows, you understand personas. Bring some of that to your hiring process. They are in a very unique situation with a lot of stress, so help them help you. And the last piece, I'm going to jump into Q&A. Hopefully there's some questions. While I do Q&A, I do have a few other slides because I've worked with a lot of smart people in my years, and I asked a few of them to kind of weigh in on, things that they do in their hiring process. So that's about it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. I guess it's a very topical one because everybody's asking about jobs right now and how they can stand out. I might just start there, and if anybody has any questions, please do write them in, because I know we got a few comments and questions on the last talk, so please keep that up. But I'm going to start off with the first one because you mentioned about how important the portfolio is, but you also mentioned don't show me everything. So
Yes.
do you have any guidelines for people? Because it can be hard when you're putting together your portfolio on what aspects you're trying to highlight. So is there any guidance that you can give people on what they should keep and what not necessarily as important?
Yeah, I think the thing that I look for is I want to find projects that have kind of a deep level of complexity, and that really, I think, and this is one of the hardest things, is I want real world experience. So usually when you're working on a big project at work, you have your sort of path, you have your process mapped out in your head. We all know what the double diamond is. I've seen it in way too many portfolios. But the more interesting stuff is when things go wrong and how you adapt to those situations. And I think this comes back to sort of the storytelling piece is, you really want to build case studies or projects that that show that journey, that tell an interesting story. And in an ideal world, those stories end in impact, and you can show some data around that. I understand that's really hard given like maybe where you were sitting, what opportunities you might have had. But I think if you can find, let's say, 4 case studies, projects that you feel really strongly about, those would be the kind of things that I'm looking for as a hiring manager. I don't want to see some cookie cutter thing that may be beautiful but doesn't really get into like how you actually do real design work. Does that answer the question? Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, I love the impact approach as well, and kind of what was the underlying problem, because maybe it's not the prettiest solution. Maybe you're B2B and it's a lot of data on screen, but that's what was needed for
Right.
that use case. The other one on the portfolio, how much should a person share on how much they did as well? Because I've seen so many portfolios, and my first question is, well, this is a big product. You didn't do everything. So I'd love to kind of know what exactly was your role and where did you fit in this? So what's your advice on that?
I agree that's really hard, especially when you're working, at an enterprise level. I think it's really important that people are upfront about what their role was. I've seen, a pretty standard case study template includes sort of like a line early on about what their role was on the team, what they were responsible for. And I think the thing that I'm looking for as a hiring manager, you make that statement about, okay, here's what my role was. You're telling the story and you're showing me where you had impact along the way. Obviously, if you're working at a bigger company, you're leveraging design systems, you're leveraging branding guidelines, you're leveraging all these resources to make that design. But the thinking and the process and the decisions are the part that I'm looking for, and that helps me understand how you think and how you work as a designer.
So would you advocate for kind of putting in a few more iterations rather than just, here's the problem, here's the solution?
I love seeing iterations. I love seeing like what wasn't chosen and why. I think those are often more interesting than the actual like final result.
Yeah. Brilliant. I'm going to jump to the other one because you mentioned don't chase up straight away on LinkedIn. You were saying it's not necessarily a negative, but it can be distracting. But as you said, and I've seen this as well, when we put up a job posting, it's instantly hundreds of applications. So it's very hard. Like, how do you try to step out or stand out from the crowd? Or do you have any suggestions on what people can do?
I do think reaching out on LinkedIn or other networks isn't like the wrong thing to do if you have sort of a legitimate, honest sort of question. I think I've done this in the past. If a hiring manager posts something, I will generally go down the path of applying, and then you can do a follow-up without sort of, just being like, I think it's how you approach the follow-up. It's not just like, hey, look at me, I need your attention. It's engaging with them contextually. Maybe it's a deeper question about the job description. Maybe it's a question about the company. I think there's other ways to reach out too, of maybe using your network to talk to other designers who work at the company, not necessarily the hiring manager. I think there's ways of sort of finding an angle without necessarily going straight to sort of the gatekeeper for that attention. So I fully understand, and I fully have done that, the LinkedIn reach out, but I do think it's the how, not the that you're doing it. It's really coming with some empathy and with some sort of like, I understand the problem here, and let me ask a question that's actually meaningful.
Great. There's two examples that I thought I would share, just that I saw really good. Somebody reached out on my network and asked somebody else to contact me and give me a live reference. So unprompted, somebody from my network said, this person's great, you should check them out. I thought that was good.
Yeah.
And the second one that somebody did was, they were looking for a job, so they had time, and they said, look, I'll come in and I'll work for 1 week with your team. I'm that excited to work on this. I know that's the best way that I can show. So that kind of put them to the top of the pile. I know it's not everybody's taste to give out free labor, but it was just something to try and get them to the top of the queue. They'd been looking for months and decided they had to take drastic action. So that worked for them.
I have done that as well. If a colleague knows that I have a connection on LinkedIn, I will actually reach out on the candidate's behalf, which is another way of going about it, which also feels a little more helpful than sort of self-aggrandizing.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I guess the last question that I have is around the final interview. So your kind of HQ day. What are you trying to get across? Do you have advice? Is it you're trying to show agency, likability? Because at this point, it's less probably around the skill sets and more around the personality.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's some personality at the HQ day. You're going to be in meetings with people who you've never had any contact with in HQ day. So there's a lot of variables. And I think it's really about being sort of like open, and it's there's this sort of age-old thing of like you're interviewing them too, and that's a real thing. So you really want to be super aware of like what those conversations look like. The way I try to run an HQ day is I want it to feel as much like the real job as possible. So what I'm looking for in those conversations is like, are they going to bring value? Are they going to be someone who's a collaborator? Are they going to be someone who, listens and takes things in, as well as like, is helpful and part of the team? I'm generally not looking for someone to come in and kind of like blow my mind at that point. If I bring them to that stage, I have a pretty high confidence that they will be good at the job. That they have the skills for the job. So at that point, it's really like we're checking for all the other stuff. I've already decided as a hiring manager that they are close and they are skilled. So yeah, it is a lot of the intangibles at that point.
Brilliant. Well, that actually brings us to time. So I just want to thank you once again, John, for sharing, and I hope everybody out there enjoyed it as much as I did. So that brings us to an end for our session today. But if you did like it, we host some events globally around the world. So we just finished them actually last May, but we're going again to New York next May and to Berlin as well. So we do hope you'll come to see. It's the same concept. It's product, UX, design, and dev all working together, because if you want to do a cross-functional team, you have to learn as one. So hopefully we'll see you there. And if not, I want to thank the speakers once again for sharing, both John and Kevin. And I look forward to seeing you at the next UXDX Online. Thank you very much.